Welcome to 20th Century Music and Arts. In this episode, I'm going to look at a band whose music I really like, but only for about a 2-year period of their career. And that band is the mighty Grand Funk Railroad. Now, with most of my favorite bands and artists, there's usually a time period of musical output that I feel that is their peak, and the band either becomes kind of repetitive with their sound or they move in a more commercial direction. Grand Funk Railroad, for me, is unbelievable in their sound. During the years of, say, 1969 to 1970. Some of my favorite music was produced by them. But then I kind of lost interest in the band. But I gotta tell you, for those 2 years, maybe they were the greatest band in the world. Now, the roots of Grand Funk Railroad go back to, of course, the city of Flint, Michigan, and 2 great garage bands from the 60s. Terry Knight and the Pack, and Question Mark and the Mysterians. Mark Farner, Don Brewer from Terry Knight and the Pack, and Mel Shocker was from Question Mark and the Mysterians. Now, Terry Knight, instead of being a singer now, would end up becoming Grand Funk Railroad's manager. They started out as a 5-piece, but they ended up becoming a 3-piece, and they kind of basing their sound around bands like Cream, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and of course, Blue Cheer. But this sound would have a much rawer, Midwest working class sound. They wanted to call themselves the Grand Trunk Railroad initially, but because of the famous railway company, but of course there were copyright issues and the name was changed to Grand Funk Railroad. And they really came together as a band in early 1969. And the band certainly brought that funk that was part of their name. As being from Michigan, they were influenced by Motown and rhythm and blues. But, they play this heavily amplified, bluesy proto-metal. But it's also full of soul. Their manager, Knight, would have a real savvy promotional style. And he would bring this band massive fame within the first year of their existence. Now, the band made a huge impression with their appearance at the Atlanta International Pop Festival on July 4th weekend in 1969. Grand Funk Railroad made such an impression that they played all 3 days of the festival, and this led them to getting signed on Capitol Records, and they would release their debut album, On Time, on August 25th, 1969. And wow! What a debut. Imagine a funkier, more primitive, and thicker sounding version of Cream, but with a whole lot of soul. The talent of this band is just fantastic. You got the drumming of Brewer, the bass playing of Shocker. They lay this thick rhythmic foundation that's all part of this musical stew. But for me, the star of this band is Mark Farner. Not only is his guitar playing unbelievable, and it's got this bluesiness, this funkiness, but his vocals are so powerful and so emotional. Just amazing. Now, the album starts out with the highly energetic Are You Ready? This is just heavy and groovy. It discharges the passionate and funky Anybody's Answer. It goes into the melodic and kind of fun-sounding song Time Machine, which would actually be the band's first single. Then you've got High on a Horse. It's just great with its passionate vocals and real fierce guitar. And it's actually got some boogie-woogie piano played in there by Farner as well. Next is TNUC. I will let you figure that one out. But that is a great song it's got a real great jam section. Of course, it's got a very long drum solo, probably influenced by Toad from Cream.
You won't find me knocking at your door. I'm gone forever.
Now, the highlight for me on this album, though, is the really extended jamming on the track Into the Sun, which has a whole lot of dynamic interplay between the 3 musicians. Then you've got the incredible Heartbreaker. Now, that's not to be confused with the Led Zeppelin song that we released later that year. It's just a great emotionally expressive rock song and just an incredible guitar solo by Mark Farner. And then you've got the really funky Call Yourself a Man. And then there's the soulful and epic Can't Be Too Long. And of course, the album ends with the joyful and upbeat song Ups and Downs. They even go into Row, Row, Row Your Boat in the song. You know, On Time is really one of my favorite albums. And this is at the time when the idea of heavy rock and its rules, it hadn't really been established. It was just being born as a genre. And what's cool about this is just as much R&B and funk as it is cream and blue cheer. They combined fuzzy heaviness. It's just so primitive in sound with the passion of soul music. I cannot recommend this album enough. And the band was becoming famous because of their live shows. Their reputation was really spreading fast. And you know, at that time with the improvements in amplification that happened in the late 1960s, arenas could be filled by a wall of sound that they just couldn't be before. And this is what Grand Funk Railroad, they're one of the bands that really pioneer this, and it's a sound we would call arena rock. Now, before it became a cliched term where you'd put down these sort of dinosaur rock bands, Grand Funk Railroad were really pioneering this sound, and they're creating a high-volume rock that could best be played in front of massive crowds. You think of these huge Marshall stacks. Now, they were back in the studio by the end of the year to record another record. Grand Funk Railroad's sophomore album was self-titled, but it became known by the fans as simply the Red Album because of the cover. Now the sound here, it's heavier, it's more confident, and even more unapologetically raw. The album was recorded from October 10th to October 21st, 1969, and was released right at the end of the year on December 29th, 1969. Now this album, it's another favorite album of mine, but it actually might be my favorite by the band. It starts out with this great song, Get This Thing on the Move. It's just a driving opener. It's got heavy rips. It's got this bluesy swagger. It just sets the tone perfectly for the whole album. And again, it's that raw groove and funkiness. It's so infectious. And then you've got the heavy groove and that bass. It kind of continues on Please Don't Worry. You've got Highfalutin Woman. It's got some serious boogie-woogie piano playing on it. Then we have Mr. Limousine Driver. It's kind of more polished and melodic, offering a glimpse of their band's kind of versatility in terms of their playing. Now, Mark Farner wants to get personal with a woman in the back of the limo, and he just needs the driver to make sure things go smoothly and not to observe what he's getting up to. Next, we have In Need, and it's In Need has this great complex groove. Next track, Winter and My Soul, has just some incredible guitar playing on it. And then there is the track Paranoid. There is no way that Black Sabbath did not listen to this track. First of all, it starts out with the same kind of sirens that one hears at the beginning of the track War Pigs. And of course, there's the title of the song, which would be the title of a song in an album by Black Sabbath. But you know, Grand Funk Railroad's Paranoid, it's even more heavy and menacing. The sound here is like the guitar turned up to 11, and it's just full of fuzz and wah-wah, and it matches the thickness of any grunge band from Seattle. Get this album for this track alone. Then the album closes with an incredible cover of the Animals song, Inside Looking Out. The jamming in this song is absolutely fierce and fantastic. Again, you get this incredible vocals and guitar playing from Mark Farner. He really needs more recognition as both a guitar player and a vocalist. You know, the rhythm section is so foundational in the sound as well, too. You know, if you want a sound that would be the basis of where heavy rock would go in the 1970s, you gotta check out the second Grand Funk Railroad album. The distortion, it's created purely by volume. It's not through all these pedals. So there's kind of this beautiful earthiness. Again, the soul to the sound. Just fantastic stuff. Now, despite being dismissed by the critics and not being given very much radio play, both On Time and the Red Album were awarded gold status by 1970. And with that promotion of Terry Knight, the band became a massive phenomenon that year in 1970. Again, they played the Atlantic International Pop Festival, and they toured relentlessly that year, playing a total of 111 shows. They were both headliners. They also shared the stage with so many other famous bands from that time. And so it was also during that year they would go back into the studio in March of 1970 to record one more masterpiece. In my opinion, this is their last masterpiece. Closer to Home, it was released on June 15th, 1970. The album's third effort, it showed the band evolving, adding more musical dynamics, more structure, more ambition. There's still this fuzz-drenched guitar in there, and there's this thunderous bass and pounding drums, but it's more melodic, more focused, more emotionally resonant. Now, it starts out with the absolutely killer and heavy Sin's A Good Man's Brother. Just incredible proto-metal guitar work here. Monster Magnet would do a fantastic cover of this song. And then there is the funky, but still heavy, upbeat, Aimless Lady, and this funkiness just continues on the next track. Nothing is the same. It's like a soul band on steroids. Then the pace really slows down on Mean Mistreater. It's got this eeriness to it. It's got this organ work that would be so ubiquitous in the early 70s. But the sound is pure soul and funk, but it's also thick and heavy. And Mark Farner, he's playing the keyboards. Again, so talented. And the vocals on this track are just ethereal.
Mean mistreater, you make me cry.
Now, the keyboard and organ is again front and center on Get It Together. Again, whole lot of soul in the sound there. And that vibe continues on I Don't Have to Sing the Blues. And then Hooked on Love. Again, it's pure soul and R&B. An incredible sound with backing vocalists.
Did you ever have something you want the whole wide world to know about?
And then, of course, there's I'm Your Captain, Closer to Home. It's the crown jewel of the album, arguably Grand Funk's entire catalog. You know, starting out as a straightforward rock song, it blossoms into this kind of like 9-minute suite. It's got lush orchestration, it's got these layered vocals, and one of the most iconic codas in rock history. You know, its lyrical themes, they talk about failure of leadership, being isolated, and, you know, this really struck a chord with people who were on tour of duty in Vietnam and just dreamed about going back home. Now, Closer to Home was a real commercial breakthrough. It went gold and was their third album to do so in 1970, and it would eventually go multi-platinum and helped, you know, catapult Grand Funk from, you know, just these sort of cult heroes to arenas and stadiums. You know, I'm Your Captain, it became an enduring classic and it received heavy airplay for decades to come, and it's considered one of the greatest rock epics of all time. And it kind of softened the band's sort of rough image. A little bit, anyway. And you know, they were absolutely packing in the stadiums in the year of 1970. And so, these performances, they really need to be captured on vinyl. So we've got the Grand Funk live album. And it's made up of performances mostly from the Jacksonville Coliseum show that was on June 23rd, and 2 performances recorded at the West Palm Auditorium the next night, June 24th. Now, the cover depicts the band at the Atlanta International Pop Festival in 1970, and the intro, where the announcers try to calm the crowd down, was taken from the festival as well. Now, this album starts out, you can hear the energy of that crowd chanting the band's name, and man, this album is fierce, primitive, highly amplified rock at its best. It starts out with Are You Ready? There's such a heavy performance of Paranoid. You got a funky performance of In Need. You've got a really raw performance of Heartbreaker. Now, Inside Looking Out is just an amazing jam on this. You've got a break where Mark gives some words of wisdoms and warns people not to take any drug that's been handed to them. Then they play Mean Mistreater, where Mark plays the organ and gives an awe-inspiring vocal performance. Just amazing. His voice fills up that whole arena. And they get into this crazy psychedelic jam that was just called Mark Says Alright, and it gets so intense by the end. It's just high-octane guitar playing. And then there's a ferocious version of TNUC. And then the album closes again with that epic Into the Sun with that amazing jamming. You know, even though critics hated this album, the fans absolutely loved it. And, you know, the live album went platinum within days of its release, reaching number 5 on the Billboard 200. The live album isn't perfect, and that's exactly why it's so good. You know, it captures Grand Funk Railroad's spirit. It's raw, it's relentless, and it's totally in tune with their audience. And, you know, when the album was released, 1971, Grand Funk Railroad would have the world in the palm of their hand. You know, they sold out Shea Stadium that year in 1971 faster than the Beatles had. But you know, they would release 2 albums that year, Survival and E Pluribus Funk. These albums are okay, but I kind of lose interest in the band at this point. I don't know, those albums to me don't have the same edge as the first 3 albums. And you know, what would happen later is they'd have issues with Knight as their manager. You know, he had produced those first 3 albums, and it's great sound on them. But, you know, the band were playing stadiums, and they're selling platinum records, but they're not really seeing very much money. I mean, they should have been living in the lap of luxury here. So as a result, Knight would be fired, but he would then sue them for breach of contract, which would keep them in the courts for a few years and create a lot of problems. And then the band would change a lot. They'd have this sort of good time funk sound with, you know, their most famous song there, We're an American Band. You know, again, the music is okay, but it was, for me, that 2-year period of Grand Funk Railroad, which was one of the most fantastic periods for any band in the history of rock music. You know, that 1969 to 1970. They were heavy, funky, primitive, raw, and so musically talented. You know, do yourself a favor and get those first 3 albums and the live album. Those recordings show that Grand Funk Railroad in 1969 and 1970 was the greatest band in the world. Thanks for watching 20th Century Music and Arts. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Let me know what you think of Grand Funk Railroad. Thank you.